Hello, everyone. Good evening. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our town hall. Good to see some old friends and some wonderful colleagues in the work that we do on a daily basis. So I am delighted to be with you for our first town hall this year. And the title is Gun Safety. I'm so excited to welcome our wonderful guests. And so we will just move along. I am Dr. Aimy Steele with New North Carolina Project and New North Carolina Project Action First. New North Carolina Project is a 501c3 organization, and New North Carolina Project's Action First is a 501c4 organization. I am excited and honored to lead both organizations focused on really empowering people to elevate their lives in four key pillar areas, and those are economic mobility, public safety, civic engagement, and housing security. So this evening, we are working under our public safety pillar and talking about gun safety. And my, do we have many reasons to talk about gun safety this evening? So I do want to welcome you all. And again, thank you for coming. I am going to jump in and introduce our esteemed panelists this evening. So to begin, we have Becky Ceartas. Becky is the executive director of North Carolinians Against Gun Violence and has been leading the organization since 2014. She has a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Delaware in environmental science and has 25 years of experience with local, state, and national nonprofits. She feels very fortunate to work in North Carolina with NCGV, volunteers, and supporters to fulfill its mission to make North Carolina safe from gun violence through educating the public about preventing gun violence, enforcing current laws, and enacting new laws. So let's welcome Becky to the stage. Thank you for being with us, Becky. Next up, we have Sharon Robinson. Sharon is a Georgia native and a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. In 2017, she founded EOJNA Natural Skincare and has spent over 30 years supporting unhoused women, children, and at-risk youth. In 2021, after the tragic loss of her son, Christian, Sharon turned her grief into advocacy, speaking out against gun violence and meeting with lawmakers. She also founded Illuminated Steps Forward, a nonprofit focused on healing for families affected by trauma. Sharon works with Everytown Survivor Network and Moms Demand Action, offering support to those impacted by gun violence. She also advocates for healthcare access and disability rights through the Lupus Foundation, all while honoring her son's memory and working toward a safer, more just world. So let's welcome Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. And lastly, one of our esteemed panelists, Scarlett Hollingsworth. Scarlett is a wife, mother, and software trainer, and a dedicated activist. She and her husband, Ed, moved to Charlotte in 1992, where their three adult children still live. After the 2016 election, you know that one, right? Scarlett became deeply involved in volunteer work, joining Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America in 2017. She currently leads the Charlotte Group, working to strengthen community connections and combat gun violence. Scarlett has attended national events in Washington, D.C., including Gun Sense University and the Soul Box Project exhibit. She also served as communications manager for Indivisible North Carolina District 9 and has been quoted in Time magazine. Let's give Scarlett a hand and welcome all of our esteemed panelists. And we're going to kick it off with all the panelists offering some remarks, and we'll go in that order: Becky, Sharon, and then Scarlett. So to all of you, to kick things off, gun violence is often framed as a public safety issue, which is why we at New North Carolina Project have it housed under our public safety pillar. But it is deeply connected to really many aspects of our lives. So from your perspective, each of you, what makes gun violence such a critical issue for our communities today?
Well, Thank you again so much for having us here today. We actually also have a 501c3, North Carolinians Against Gun Violence, and then a 501c4, North Carolinians Against Gun Violence Action Fund, to look at, who is representing us, the laws and policies, because our communities are really facing a public health crisis here in North Carolina. One person dies every 5 hours in North Carolina, the leading cause of injury death for kids in North Carolina. And it makes me so upset because there are policies and programs that we know can save lives, such as, keeping our concealed carry weapons permitting system, making sure that people are at least 21 years old and have a background check and have a training to carry concealed. Things like red flag laws, safe storage, community violence intervention programs. And these are just a few of the policies and programs that we know can save lives. So that's what we're really dedicated to doing, and really hopeful to be working with all of you and seeing that all of you are concerned about this as well.
Thank you for having me on this panel along with the other awesome panelists that I'm quite familiar with, Scarlett as well as Becky. Um, this is a crucial issue as a mom and as a advocate who would like to see change and this not happen to another family or a community. From a public health perspective, um, we're battling mental health. We're battling, um, as Becky mentioned, safe storage is an issue. And having people become educated about securing their firearm is crucial. Not another child should have access to a gun where they can hurt themselves or their family. Not another mother should be in the situation that I am in, not another community. So it's an issue that affects everybody. And we all are one when it comes to gun violence because it has no face. It knows no political party. It knows no race. It knows no gender. And that's why this is such an important and crucial issue that we've got to tackle, and it has to be tackled together.
You, Amy, and thank you, Kristen, and everyone for being here. On top of everything that Becky and Sharon have shared, I'll say that the one thing about the importance of fighting back on gun violence is people purchase guns with most of the time with the intention to protect themselves. And that in the data shows to be actually not true. Having a gun in your home actually leads to more potential risk of harm or death. And through accidents, through mental health situations, and the fact that in the United States of America, there are more guns circulating in this country than there are people. It is, to both of their points, an epidemic. And gun violence is the #1 cause of death in our children in this country. And that is a statistic that you can say, and it doesn't always really land the way I think it needs to land. Guns are the #1 cause of death in our children in this country. I don't know what more we need to be focusing on that could be more important than to make sure that people understand that if they have a gun in the home, that one of their #1 responsibilities is to keep that gun secure. So through Moms Demand Action, we also have a C3 and a C4. And through our C3, we do have a Be Smart program, which teaches about safe storage. We partner with multiple groups that we've gone and done tabling. We give away gun locks. We teach people a presentation about what the SMART acronym stands for. And then in lieu of that, and on top of that, with our C4, and I can talk more about this later, we really want to push back on legislation that wants to loosen our gun laws to make it easier for people to buy guns and carry guns and, even permitless carry. So it is an epidemic. It is a preventable epidemic, and it's something that we can all do something about.
So thank you all so much for just your introductory remarks, because I think we can learn so much just from that little piece. Especially the fact that we have more guns in our country than people. Like, that is alarming. If that's alarming to you in the chat, please drop a note, a message, something to indicate that you agree that having more guns in our country than people is quite an alarming statistic. I don't own a gun, and I'm not saying, no one should own a gun. What I'm saying is I don't own one. But knowing that someone has a gun for me, for my number of humanity, is alarming. So that's one piece. And then the gun storage piece is just quite another. Sharon, would you dive deeper into your comment? And Scarlett touched on it a bit about giving away gun locks and things like that. Would you dive deeper into your comment about the fact that children should not have access to guns because they're not safely stored? And what was your experience with that, and what can we do about that?
So my experience with that, my son Kristen was 32, father of 3 children, a truck driver, and he was innocently killed while standing in line to make a purchase at a random convenience store, killed by a 17-year-old. The young man had just turned 17 that day. When he was arrested, 4 guns was confiscated from his possession, in which I'm pretty sure he probably stole them. So for me, in my situation, when I look at that and I think of how there are measures that could be put in place to be a deterrent, as well as measures can be put in place that would eliminate so many from being stolen. And that could be through safe storage, gun locks, gun boxes. And knowing that programs like Be Smart are awesome to educate. And for me, making sure that we can provide educational tools is a place that we can start. But the gun owners have to implement it. And oftentimes, from what I'm hearing, people say, well, I need to have quick access. And though you may feel the need to have quick access, you don't want that access to be at the hands of a child. Oftentimes, we're hearing on the news, especially most recently over the last year or so, small children as young as 2 and 3 years old getting their hands on guns because the adult in the house did not secure it properly. And what happens? The child injures themselves or kills the family member or injures the family members. This could have been prevented. That could have been prevented. So in my situation, it is alarming, and the trauma of what my family has experienced resurface every time I hear of another injury or loss at the hands of gun. And that is it's hard to live with once you have now been introduced to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Not ever knowing what could trigger, and trying to stay aware by watching the news can sometimes be a trigger.
Yeah.
So this becomes a health issue for me. And so that's why safe storage is crucial. It's crucial for so many reasons, especially for our children, as well as those who experiencing some type of a mental health breakdown where they can harm themselves or others. And having laws in place that would help with protecting ourselves and protecting our children from harming themselves or others at the hands of a gun. It's something that we all really need to take a stand in, because
Yeah.
this is a real hard place to be in. It's hard on this side. It's extremely hard every day to live with the thought of a child, a 17-year-old was able to get his hands on a gun and kill my son. And now my son's son no longer have his father. My son's daughters no longer have their father. No more father-daughter dances. Those days are over, never to return for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing that. I think you illuminated something that's very critical. It's the survivor's mental health, because it's not only your mental health, it's the mental health of your grandchildren, of any surviving spouse or partner. You know, it's the mental health of everyone who knew your loved one. So thank you for sharing. Scarlett, you wanted to add to this topic as well?
Yes, I think, when we talk about how can we reach out to in people to make them understand about what their part is and they can play in this. And I know that, and for Moms Mean Action, we do support the Second Amendment. We do know and we recognize that gun owners do have a right to own their gun. And so just one thing to call out to that is that we have a broad swath of people that are part of Moms Mean Action. Moms Mean Action is one of the largest grassroots organizations across the United States. And we are made up of gun owners. In fact, one of our strong volunteers is a military veteran, 15 years working in the Pentagon, and is a gun owner, and has worked with our Be Smart program, teaching people about safe gun storage and training people, and also going to the gun stores and coordinating with them about, can we ensure that you are educating people about safe gun storage when people are purchasing a gun. A few years ago, Grace McLean, who's on here, and I were part of a town hall that was aired on Spectrum. And we had people on both sides of the aisle. We had Larry Hyatt, who owns Hyatt Guns, and we had Moms Mean Action. We had a parent of two of the children that survived Sandy Hook. And we had these robust discussions. And I'll never forget that afterwards, we went to right across the street, and Grace and I talked to two of the men that worked at Hyatt Guns. And they shared their commitment to why they believe so strongly in the need to bear arms, but also the fact that they understand the responsibility that they have when they're selling a gun to make sure that people are meeting the criteria. And we found that we had a little bit more in common than we thought. So I think it's opening those conversations and making sure that people are aware that as an organization, we're not telling anybody that does want to own a gun you shouldn't. We're just saying that if you do, keep it secure.
That's right. And that's not an unreasonable request at all. Becky, North Carolina's had historically some, significant gun rights support. Can you share how NCAGV is working to really overcome some of the political resistance in our state and build bipartisan support for stronger gun laws?
Yes, well, thank you. And, we also we say time and time again, we're, supporters of the Second Amendment. We're not here to take anyone's guns away. We're against gun violence. And so this is a conversation we often will have at the General Assembly and with the public when we're out in the community. And when we give somebody a gun lock, that opens the door to really have those conversations. Like as I said, we're here for preventing gun violence, which we can all agree that we need to do. In 2021, 2022, and 2023, over 1,800 people were killed by guns in North Carolina. Again, simply unacceptable. Should we partner with organizations throughout the state with similar interests in preventing gun violence like Moms Demand, Moms Rising, Council of Churches, individual congregations and denominations, and law enforcement? With that, we can really work across the aisle and talk to people about, the importance of making sure someone's at least 21 years old, has training, and has a background check to carry concealed. Democrats and Republicans agree with us on this. Law enforcement also agree. But unfortunately, there's been two bills already introduced at the General Assembly that would get rid of the requirement to have a permit to carry concealed, which means that somebody as young as 18 years old with no training, no background check can carry a hidden loaded weapon in public. And I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in learning more about this topic, but that's really how we go about doing this, building a broad coalition and just talking to lawmakers, presenting them with the facts, and having people come together to agree that we need to prevent gun violence.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right that, the premise here is that no one's trying to take anyone's guns. I don't know how many times you have to say that for someone to actually believe you. When you say we're not trying to abolish the Second Amendment, we're literally just trying to make it safer for really some of our more vulnerable populations, those with mental health issues, children, people who just simply don't need access to guns yet. I can't see a need for a 2-year-old to hold a gun. I just can't. Or a 4-year-old, or even a 17-year-old. But, this is the society in which we live. So back to you, Sharon. You turned the tragic loss of your son and grief into action. Can you speak to kind of how you found the strength to channel your pain? I know you've spoken already about the mental health challenges that you face, but how did you find the pain how did you turn that pain into advocacy? And how has this experience shaped how you work with our legislators, and just advocates in general?
Great question. Moms demand action. North Carolinians against gun violence as well. People probably get sick of me saying this, but it comes from the heart in such an authentic place. I couldn't be on here speaking with you right now if it wasn't for the support that I have received from Moms Demand Action and Everytown Survivor Network. The Everytown Survivor Network gave me a voice at a time when I felt isolated. No one in my family other than myself is the mother. And as Kristen's mom, I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could talk to that understood me, understood what I was experiencing. They helped me make sense of what I was experiencing. And it could not be a therapist. It had to be someone who was familiar with the experience. And when I was connected with moms through the Survivor Fellows Program, is where that connection came. And when I attended the first Gun Sense University Summit, and I saw thousands of people, I was able to exhale, because what it gave me was the opportunity to see there are so many people who care. And it was like a release to say, okay, I'm free to figure out what I can do in this, because I've got to do something. I can't just sit here and not do anything. And this continues and continues to happen to another family. And so the resilience to move forward has come from the training, the support, the connection with so many people. It is almost like a renewed breath of fresh air every time I see the faces, whether it be a Zoom or in person. It's like, okay, you can keep it moving because you know you have others along this journey with you. And that has what's been the fuel behind my pain, that has pushed my pain into purpose movement. So I move about on purpose because I know I'm not alone.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And no, you're not alone. There are many people who, support you and support the groups that you mentioned. Many of them are with us this evening. So, yeah, thank you. So Scarlett, as the leader of Charlotte Moms Demand Action Group, what specific issues related to gun violence are most pressing in Charlotte? So we've kind of gone nationally down to North Carolina, and now we're kind of zeroing in on Charlotte, which is where New North Carolina Project spent most of our last election cycle. So what are those pressing issues, and how are you all working together with other groups and just within your own group to address these issues at the local level? Because we have some gun violence issues in Charlotte.
We do. And, we have had several community gun violence prevention groups that we've actually had come and speak to our group. Team Up Connections is one of them. We just have worked with another organization called Bunk 57 Ministries. Of course, Heal Charlotte, if you're familiar with Greg Jackson's work. And through all of these, and that's just a smattering, what Sharon's been doing, also Claudia Hemingway, whose son was murdered in 2019, and her son's murderer was just found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. So we know that we have a youth gun violence problem in Charlotte. When we had the Team Up Connections, the Certivants come and speak to us, and they run a year-long program for people, well, children up to age 18, I believe, that have been involved in some kind of law issue. And they work with them through a program. And Mr. Certivant is a former police officer. And these kids respond to him so well. And he asks them in front of their parents, have you ever held a gun? And these are kids as young as 12 and 13 years old. And they say, yes, sir, I have. And their parents weren't familiar with that they had done that. And then he asks them, have you ever shot a gun? And they had. He even asks them, have you ever held an AR-15 and shot an AR-15? And the kids as young as 12 and 13 have. So we know that that is one of our biggest issues in Charlotte. So through multiple groups that we partner with, in fact, with Bump 57 Ministries, and this kind of gets to what Sharon was saying with the community that we build. We had about 15 Moms Demand Action volunteers, and we went to a line dancing fundraiser with Bump 57 Ministries. And we bonded together through line dancing, but also with the common mission to support the work, to reach out to the youth that Ira Lawrence works with Bump 57. So that is a major issue in what we're doing in the Charlotte region. But I'm going to piggyback off what Becky said real quickly, and I put it in the chat. With that permitless carry that has been introduced, 2 bills have been introduced in the state of North Carolina, which obviously would definitely have major ripple effects in Charlotte. There is a way that you can make your voice heard about that. And I put that in the chat so you can reach out to your sheriff.
Okay, and our sheriff is in Charlotte, is Gary McFadden. So what are we reaching out to the sheriff to say?
So it is actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And you're right, we're very fortunate to have Sheriff McFadden here. And actually, Reverend Sharon Risher, who just reached out to him, was college, they went to college together. So she bent his ear about this. And what this is about is to ask your sheriff to oppose, and not only just your sheriff, but the North Carolina Sheriff's Association to oppose the two bills. So, and I put the two bill numbers in the chat, House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 50, which again, both of these are to allow, and Sharon mentioned it as well, children 18 years old to carry permitless, to permitless carry a handgun. So that is what we're asking them to oppose and to stand together with us, because that is only going to make their lives more dangerous, their work more dangerous, if we have this kind of permitless carry in the state of North Carolina.
Okay, so thank you so much. Let's break this down just a little bit, because anytime you ask people to advocate for something, sometimes they get a little bit maybe overwhelmed by the word advocate, because it may seem like it's something that's going to get them in trouble or put them on, front stage, especially if they have a job that maybe can't see them being as politically engaged as perhaps we are. We work in politics for a living, or we volunteer in politics for a living. So we often can take risks that some other people can't. So let me just break down what Scarlett said. Scarlett said that you, in North Carolina specifically, can contact your sheriff and just ask him or her or them to oppose the bill. How would they oppose the bill? How would you ask them to oppose the bill? You can ask them by phone, you can ask them by email, you can ask them by whatever messaging system or contact system is available for that sheriff for your county. We have 100 counties in North Carolina. For that sheriff for your county, and say, I want to speak to the sheriff when you call or email. This is for the sheriff, and I'm asking the sheriff to oppose North Carolina House Bill 5, North Carolina Senate Bill 50, because it is harmful to our society. It actually makes your job more harmful if you don't oppose this bill. And then maybe go into a few reasons why you think it would be harmful for them, or what the research shows. You can go to Moms Demand Action's website, Everytown USA's website. You can go to North Carolinians Against Gun Violence's website. Whatever research you need to do to put just two or three simple points in the email or on the phone, and talk to the sheriff about it or email them about it. But let's take some action. It's no longer okay in the political climate we're in for folks to just sit around and wait for things to happen. I did a post on TikTok called Mess Around and Find Out. So I didn't curse, right? The FAFO, but I did mess around and find out, because there are some things that if you just wait long enough, you will mess around and find out. And gun violence and the prevention of gun violence is one of those things. It only takes a person to be impacted by something so tragically to then maybe consider that the getting involved politically is your right. It's your, it's what you should do, and it's how you should just be, because there's always something going on. And I hate for it to be a tragedy. I'd really hate for us to have to experience what Sharon experienced for us to say enough is enough. So just take the action in small baby steps now that can help not only you and our society, but your children, your grandchildren, and your kids, right? So let's not just sit this one out and say, well, I don't know how to contact my sheriff. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. You can figure it out. If we can figure out how to use all these applications on our phones and figure out how to order groceries and get them to our house, or order a car to come and pick us up, or go and do all these things that we do with AI, surely we can figure out how to contact our sheriff and ask them to oppose these two bills. So I'm going to lay off my soapbox for just a second. And Sylvia says, should we get some letters to the editor going in newspapers around the state? Sylvia, yes. Anything you can do to bring light to those House bills, because I guarantee you, no one's sitting around watching all the House bills and Senate bills pass back and forth in the North Carolina General Assembly. Becky mentioned she goes to the General Assembly. I'm sure Scarlett's been, I'm sure Sharon's been. Y'all, people don't have time to go back and forth to Raleigh, to go sit in the chamber and watch all these House bills go back and forth and exchange and the debate and all that. So people are doing it. We can support them by doing it. We can, make donations to the organizations, or you can stir up some stuff in your own area. Because not only are sheriffs under fire for, all sorts of things within the county related to gun violence in this particular bill, but guess what? They're also involved with ICE things right now and immigration. And we're not here to talk about immigration tonight, but there is always something for you to write about or to get your community organized around. This is a perfect issue for the newspaper, Sharon, okay? And the news, all right? Okay, let me get back to why we're here. We have a few more minutes. So for all the panelists, gun violence is often linked to police violence and tensions between law enforcement and communities of color. So how do you see the role of law enforcement in gun violence prevention, and what reforms do you believe are necessary to make sure police are part of the solution and not the problem? So we'll start with Becky, and then we'll go to Scarlett, and then Sharon.
Sure. Well, I guess first off, as I mentioned, we do work with law enforcement, but we also say that, police violence is gun violence. We have to look at making sure that everyone in our communities are safe. We do work with community violence intervention programs, which they take a public health approach to preventing gun violence by trying to address some of the root causes of gun violence, while at the same time directly mediating conflicts before they turn deadly. And so these groups, they're really taking the prevention approach, but they do work with law enforcement who are taking, they come in after the fact and try and solve the crime and they work after the fact. And these CVI organizations work before an incident turns deadly. And so they make sure that there's a mutual respect for each other, because these are, two different types of ways of preventing gun violence. But so we really are supporting CVI organizations and then working with law enforcement on some of these, bigger bills on preventing, our concealed carry weapons permitting system from being taken away. In the past, they also helped support making sure that people had to have a background check before they bought a handgun, no matter where they bought that handgun. So it's kind of a both and, right? Like, so we work on prevention, we work on, making sure there's that mutual relationship, but also saying if there's, police violence is also gun violence. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sharon?
I'm sorry, I thought Scarlett was next, so I was looking down.
You know what? That's correct. I'm so sorry. I'm
okay.
wrong. Scarlett. Scarlett.
No worries, no worries. So everything that Becky said, but I'll also add to that I think just with the fact that through our Be Smart program, or if just inviting the police to come and be a part of events that we might be doing, we've also with our community violence prevention groups, just like Becky mentioned, like Bump 57, like our One Love, who Burnell Berry runs in Charlotte. We've been present there. And what we've noticed at those events is that the police also come through, because these are community-based police officers. These are the police officers that are working in these communities. And so we work with them to and partner through them, and actually have met with them through our Be Smart program they supply us with some gun locks. We distribute them out. And one of the things that I've talked to them about, because, and I don't think anybody's mentioned this here tonight, is that one of the number one places that our youth are getting guns is through unlocked cars, where people are leaving their guns unsecured in their cars. And if you talk to any police officer, that is one of their biggest concerns, because if you want to look at not only gun violence, but just an overall crime reduction, that is to keep the guns secured. Do not leave them in cars, because there is there's basically a rise in both, right? Our children are less safe. We just have more crime across the city. So with what we're doing with our police officers, it really is that, and I like what Becky said, it's like that multi-prong. So because we know that we can do what we can to prevent it, and for people to understand it, and to reach out to those that are gun owners and the parents, and start young. I mean, we're going into preschools. We're talking to the mothers and the parents there. I went to an event and we were at a big table, and it was outdoors. It was a beautiful April day, and we had a table. And we had a mother that came up to us, and she had little kids. and we had a gun safe on our table, a small one that you put in your car. And she said, I've never really thought about locking up my gun before, but I think I'm going to do that now. And she had small children. So it's really just about that. And then, like I said, just increasing our relationship with the police as well. One other way I'll mention that is that we're also part of the National Night Out. That happens every August, and we go and we host Be Smart tables there and try to build those relationships with our local police that way in all the different areas of the Charlotte region.
Perfect. That's awesome. It's surprising that the mom didn't intuitively just think that the guns needed to be hidden from the children. And I think sometimes people don't process, like I used to be a school principal, and a teacher, Spanish teacher. And in my head, kids are brilliant. They're smart, they find things, they're all the things, right? So I think differently about children's abilities and about their ways of learning. I just think very differently. So I would automatically assume that a kid would find the gun on day one because that's just how they are. So it's very interesting that the mom shared that, she didn't intuitively think, let me lock up the gun. So anyway, thanks for sharing that. Sharon.
Well, to piggyback off of what Becky and Scarlett said, CVI, community violence intervention work, is very crucial in working with law enforcement. That frontline work that is being done by community activists. Most CVI workers are trained and advocate, and they're trying to get out there and meet this issue head on, head first, before it gets to the point where law enforcement has to get involved. But in the event that law enforcement does have to get involved, that relationship between CVI trained advocates and law enforcement is where the rubber meets the road, because the two have to work together in order for the work to be impactful in the community. And our legislators being able, because I didn't answer this earlier, but being able to get in front of legislators and put a face in front of them to show them this is a real person, this is a real impact, this is a family, this is a loved one, and to be able to put your emotions in front of them and say, hey, something has to be done. Something has to be done because this is affecting us all. And what I leave with legislators that I've met in DC, I was in Georgia yesterday for Advocacy Day and met with Georgia legislators because my son was killed in Georgia. But my work is global. I live in Charlotte, and what happens in Charlotte impacts me as well as anywhere else. And to be able to get in front of legislators and say, what happened to Kristen could happen to you. It can happen to me. It can happen to a person who's in law enforcement because they're not always armed. They're a regular person just like you and I. So they too can be impacted, and that's where the human has to be brought up in front of them, that I'm a human being who works in law enforcement. So how can I work with the community better to combat this issue? Because officers are unfortunately not always handling these situations in a proper manner either. But when you put yourself in the human element outside of your job, then you can think about it from a whole different perspective that, yeah, I am a consumer. I can be out here shopping and someone can approach me and you know, I'm now affected by gun violence personally.
That's right. They can approach you in your life at
Yeah.
just as soon as you know it, you know? Thank you for sharing that. So we're gonna kind of transition into our Q&A period. I will ask the audience if you have any questions to go ahead and drop them in the chat so that I can ask our panelists, because I don't know that we're gonna get this kind of genius in the room at the same time all together and be able to ask questions specifically and directly to them. So I'd love to know your questions. But in the meantime, I will ask all the panelists kind of, well, let me ask the audience one more question. I want you to drop in the chat a 1 if you have been personally impacted by gun violence. Whatever that personal impact is, if you know someone or you have been impacted yourself, but you may know someone who's a close family or close friend and it's impacted you, please drop a 1 in the chat. So to our panelists, I want you to know, like, we sincerely appreciate you sharing your story, because someone needs to hear it, right? But someone also needs to know where they can turn to for support. And if you look at the overwhelming amount of people in the chat who have already indicated they have been impacted by gun violence one way or another, I think that just continues to prove the point as to why we need to continue talking about it, but we also need to advocate for it. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us. We appreciate you. But gun violence is everyone's problem. That's why we put this under our public safety pillar. That's where we house it. And we're going to be doing some more things in our community, specifically in North Carolina, Charlotte specifically, to impact or bring impact to this issue. But while we wait for questions from our audience, I want to ask all panelists kind of this one final question, and feel free to be generous with your answer. But what is your greatest hope for the future of gun violence prevention? And how can we ensure that our efforts bring about meaningful and long-lasting change? And maybe throw in there like one action step you want people to take today, like right now, to reduce gun violence. So we'll start with you, Sharon, and then go to Scarlett in the middle, and then Becky. So we're doing reverse.
One thing that I want to see come out of this is safety. People practicing safety. I think that covers a wide spectrum, because not only just thinking about the small children or even teenagers, but for me, I look at the number of people, whether you're a child or an adult, that are silently battling mental health issues and have committed suicide or attempted. And that's an issue that we didn't touch on tonight, but that is an issue as well that has been affected by gun violence. And I would like safety measures to be put in place that would protect us from these loose gun laws, as well as put some protection for people who are battling mental health issues. That is my hope, is that these things can happen, and that gives you hope. That gives me hope, because once someone can get the support that they need from a mental health perspective, then the healing process starts from whatever they're healing from, that can help them get over that mental health hurdle or get a proper medication to keep them from causing harm to themselves or other people. And enforcing safe gun laws, safe storage laws, making it mandatory. Yesterday, when I was in Georgia, a bill was passed where people who purchase gun locks receive a $300 tax credit. So they're getting an incentive for safe storage. And practicing education, I think education, and providing the resources. Families need resources rather, and I'm kind of speaking from my own situation, watching this young man sit in court with him for 3 years now, 3.5 years. I've watched the person who killed my son and his mother. And in my case, she knew the lifestyle her child was living. So in a case such as that, and this is the first time I've ever spoken on that, because oftentimes it's said that parents don't know, some parents do know. You know, how does that family get the support that they need, because something's not right in that household, but there's a change that needs to take place in that household. And that's something that I want to see happen. I don't want another person to sit across and see and watch someone who has taken their family members from them. I don't want anyone to have to experience that. I want the opportunity for children to not have to worry about drills because of these loose guns out here. Meeting with some of the young people who were 6 years old when Sandy Hook took place. I met a young lady yesterday, have met several in DC and at the national vigils when I attend those. But this young lady, she attended Sandy Hook and she talked about that experience. Well, she also have friends that were killed at the Appalachian High School in Georgia. So now she's revisiting those same emotions again at the age of 17. I don't want that to continue happening. So for me is that's my hope, is for some practices can be put into action. And the action is providing safe measures that would protect us all.
Yeah.
Those are the actions that I want to see happen. Safe measures that will protect us all.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. I captured some of your solutions in the chat, so thank you. Scarlett, what do you think?
So I was asked this question when I went to a middle school about what would be the thing that I would, if I believed that the work that we're doing is successful, what would that look like if we were on the other side? And, I'm looking at this group of 12 and 13-year-olds, and I said, for us to end the culture of guns in the United States and the idolatry of guns in the United States, you're probably very familiar with the poem, America is a Gun. And if you're not, I encourage you to Google it and read it. Because what has happened is that there's so much that has become synonymous with being, a certain swagger, a certain person, the bumper stickers on the back of the cars that have the families that are not stick figures, but guns. So there's a lot of things in the culture that I think needs to shift. And that's not a new phenomenon. That's been with us for a long time. So I think working to change the culture. Well, what way can you do that? Well, I mean, it's a small thing, right? But I was wearing, of course, I went away. I'm wearing my button, Mom's Man Action. I went to dinner and there was a gentleman and he said, well, what is that? And I was waiting. He was the person that was taking her name. And I told him, and he said, I agree with that. And he was a younger guy and he had been in the military. And he said, nobody needs these kinds of guns. So it's a small thing by wearing a button, talking to people in your grocery store. Sometimes I will wear my Mom's Man Action shirt out in public and you get a little side view, but then people come up to you and say, what is that? Tell me more. So changing the culture and making people aware of it. And it's not going to be a one and done thing. It's through all of the collected efforts right? It's through the safe gun storage. It's through, no, we haven't even mentioned the partnership that we have with our healthcare and our hospitals and the work that they do with community-based violence interruption as well. So it's all of those multi-pronged approach, because it's really going to take all of us doing some small effort. I put in the chat that you can text the word join to 64433. You can find out more, even if it's just wearing a red bracelet or wearing a red button and talking to your neighbors and your friends and telling them something and sharing those facts. That's how we can push back on the narrative that having a gun makes you safer, because again, that is not the case. So those are the two things that I would like to see.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I think you highlight one quick point that I want to bring attention to, and it's that, talking to your neighbors about this action, wearing a red button, wearing the red shirt. I have a red shirt, just like the Moms Demand Action shirt. So wearing the shirt, wearing the symbols, and being open to people talking to you about it. What's interesting is when people tell me they don't want to take on an issue or talk about an issue, I often find that they don't believe yet enough in the issue or its impact on society because it hasn't really impacted them or affected them. And so they haven't really taken on the ownership of advocating for it because it hasn't directly hit their homes. But when something does directly hit their home, they are open to advocating for it and trying to recruit others to advocate for that thing, whatever the thing is. So I think it's interesting that we take the approach and really encourage all of our audience members to take the approach of trusting the experts that it's a problem. So then doing the actions necessary to, rid us of the problem, or at least reduce the impact, the negative impact of the problem. So maybe buying some gun locks for your community and passing them out. All the steps that we mentioned, all the solutions that our panelists have offered. But when you advocate, just being a squeaky wheel and talking about it is your advocacy, whether, again, that's an email, a text message, a phone call, or a visit to these public locations that your tax dollars pay for. North Carolina General Assembly, city council meetings, county commissioner meetings, the sheriff's office. You can go there without getting in trouble or without the fear of getting arrested. You literally can walk to the sheriff's office and ask to speak to the sheriff. That is your right. So thank you so much for talking about the neighbor element, right? Just talking to your neighbor. All right, Becky, would you close us out? What are your hopes?
Sure. So I guess, and thinking about this, my greatest hope is the people across this state who are simply fed up with gun violence that is plaguing our communities, that is impacting individual families, as we've heard about tonight from Sharon. And Sharon, I so appreciate you for being here and for sharing. Because when we talk to lawmakers, we talk about facts and figures, and then behind every fact and figure is a family. So my greatest hope, again, is with people who are really fed up with this, whether it's happened to them personally, their community, or even they just see it on the nightly news, right? And we say, why is this still happening? It's still happening because we have elected officials who are too scared sometimes to stand up to the gun lobby, or it hasn't happened to themselves. So they think, oh, this isn't, I don't want to touch the Second Amendment. But no, we're about gun violence prevention. And that's something that we all can come together and work towards. And so some things that we can do, we talked about contacting your sheriff. You can contact your lawmaker. We all have a representative and a senator at the North Carolina General Assembly. Their website is just ncledge.gov, and you can find out who represents you. We want them to oppose House Bill 5 or oppose House Bill 7 Bill 50, Senate Bill 50. These are both the permitless carry bills that we've talked about tonight. We don't want people as young as 18 years old with no training and no background check carrying hidden loaded weapons in public. It's simply unacceptable, and things that we can all come together on saying enough is enough. So I'll drop in the chat to sign up for our alerts, and also I dropped in the chat earlier, specific ways that you can sign up to find out about how to oppose these two bills. And then also, on the positive side, we've talked a lot about safe storage. Well, the General Assembly, in a horrible bill, put in a program saying, hey, we should have a statewide educational awareness initiative about safe storage, right? Great thing. But they never funded it. So Governor Cooper went ahead with this program. He funded it, and it's called NC Safe, or Secure All Firearms Effectively. And I think I put that in the chat as well. It's simply that it's an
All right,
educational
it's
awareness.
ready.
Sorry.
You're
It's
welcome.
Go ahead. Someone is,
Okay.
I've muted them.
Okay, thanks. Um, it's an awareness initiative that we can all come together and agree safe storage is incredibly important. So the General Assembly needs to now fund this program. So that's another ask that we're asking of them, to oppose these dangerous permitless carry bills and to fund NC Safe. And at the local level, if you're interested in talking to your county commissioners or city council people about community violence intervention programs, and these need funding as well at the local level. So I'll put my email in the chat if you're interested in doing that. So just definitely, as Dr. Steele said, they work for us. So we need to, one, elect the right people, and then two, remind them over and over that this is a public health crisis that they can and they must do something about.
Yeah. And I don't think we can underscore it enough that it is a public health crisis. I have been hearing recently about countries that don't even have, guns, and it's just not their thing, right? But they're safe and they feel safe and the people feel safe. So it really begs to the question of like, why do we have to have so many guns? Going back to what we said at the top of the hour. So I appreciate you all for being on the town hall. In honor of Sharon Robinson's son, Kristen, I would love for Sharon to show us a picture of her son and display his beautiful face so that we can remember that this is one reason why we do what we do. We don't gather aimlessly and purposely. Go ahead, Sharon, at New North Carolina Project. We really want to just honor the work. Hold it up just a little bit, Sharon. We want to honor the work of Sharon, of Becky, of Scarlett, and honor the life and the legacy of people like Kristen. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just think that we have to humanize, good job, Scarlett, with the Zoom hearts. We have to humanize this work in order to make it impactful. Whatever you choose to advocate for, it's got to be for you and your family, or because it affects and impacts someone in your life or someone in your community or someone in our nation, our state, etc. But you've got to pick. We can't just sit this one out. We can't sit anything out. And I'm going to be clear, after this last election, I was just rattled. And now we're seeing the after effects of all of the legislation that's coming out of or by this particular administration. And so in our nonpartisan way, I'm saying to you that if you don't advocate for the things that matter most to you, then you will, even if you do advocate sometimes for those things, you still will become even more impacted by the things that are happening in our society and in our political structure. So you've got to choose. You're either going to sit back and watch, or you're going to get your feet wet, get your feet dirty, get your hands dirty, and get involved. So to our panelists, I just want to say a hearty thank you to Scarlett, to Becky, and to Sharon. Let's show them some love in the chat, please. And then also, I'd like to personally take a moment of privilege and thank my family, my husband and my sister, for joining. Our staff from New North Carolina Project, Kristen and Bree and Hamani, thank you all so much for being here. And thank you to the whole audience. You all rock. I appreciate you joining. We got up to 43 at one point. So thank you actually 44. So thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate you. Please join us for the next town hall. This one is going to be on March 19th, and it's going to be about food insecurity. And you will not want to miss that one, especially in light of bird flu and food supply issues and tariffs. Y'all, that one is going to be a great, great one. You will want to be there. We will be highlighting some resources on how you can ensure your own personal food supply is intact, including thinking about seeds and gardening and food storage, canning, and all sorts of other things and policy. So please join us for that town hall, and we look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you, ladies. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.